I accidentally gave a spoiler. I'm gonna cut that out. Today, we are talking The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. Hello, my name is Alicia Rose, and I run this beautiful, wonderful channel. I think in the last video you could see the tape on the railings, and I'm so sorry about that. That probably was really, really weird. We're painting the railings, basically. So, very fun. But today we are talking about The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. The Invisible Man was published in 1897. It was actually published in a magazine in different parts. And so it flows very, very well, but it's basically the modern day version of Wattpad. So, The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. Now, H.G. Wells was I think pretty famous around the time of this publishing. But I think after Invisible Man was published, he got even more famous. I think that's how it is. I did some research, not 100% sure, but yes, H.G. Wells, the man of science fiction. Everybody loves H.G. Wells. The Invisible Man is about a wonderful character who is the Invisible Man, and he goes to Ipping, which I'm going to edit in right here. If it's not, nothing's there, I'm sorry, because I don't know what my editing ability is, but it takes place in Ipping, and the Invisible Man shows up. He is in bandages, he is very, very covered up, and basically he goes on a lot of chaotic adventures. The one thing I do love about Invisible Man is that it's a lot of chaotic adventures. The Invisible Man himself is very chaotic. Just a little spoiler alert ahead. Although The Invisible Man is a really, really, really great book, if you don't want to get spoilers, you probably want to skip to my review of the book, because we're going to be talking a lot about the characters, the plot, and everything there. So, this video is more like for students who don't want to actually read the book. You get a wonderful little summary here. So the first character in The Invisible Man is the Invisible Man himself. Now his name is actually Griffin. We don't have a last name for him, but his name is Griffin. And he is also, he went to school to be a chemist, but then decided to be a physicist, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, our character is an albino, which I don't necessarily believe is extremely important. There are albinos in our world, but I think it may have something to do with some of the themes later on. So I just keep it in your mind. He is an albino, and the way that he's described in the book is he has white skin and very red eyes. So in my head, I was sort of picturing a rat. Sorry about that. I was picturing a rat. So basically what happens is he decides he wants to become a physicist. He becomes a physicist, and then he wants to he finds out that you can become invisible through light infractions. So basically we see light is basically what we see bouncing off of something. So if you can remove that bouncing ability, you are able to become invisible. That's what I think happens. Oh yeah, he turns a cat invisible at one point. Another character, Dr. Kemp, is horrified because he's like, you tested it on a cat? Like, what's going on there? I think that it has to do with light infractions. I'm not 100% sure. That chapter of the book was very, very hard to understand just because it had a lot of scientific terms. I do love physics though, so it made me very, very excited to maybe read it again, because physics, you know, physics. The interesting thing about Griffin, or the Invisible Man, people call him both things, is that he doesn't necessarily like people. I think a lot of people in today's world can relate to that. They're like, oh, I don't really like people. But he definitely does not like people. Him wanting to become invisible is very much him wanting to just invoke revenge on people. He basically does a lot to go against people, and it becomes a little terrible. Griffin decides to murder someone, and he does actually murder someone. He goes to Ipping. People in Ipping are like, what's going on with this strange guy? He eats alone, he dines alone, he doesn't like it when anybody comes. He's tearing up the whole entire room. And then they find out that he's invisible. Some of them don't believe it, first off. Some of them just really find it extremely shocking. There's one point in the book where, I can't remember who the character is. Griffin takes off his glove, and the guy's just like, oh my goodness, you don't have a hand. And then he like holds out his sleeve like this, and he's like, oh, you don't have an arm. And then suddenly his nose gets flicked, and he's like, holy crap, how did you do that? And then once it sort of gets out that there's an invisible man in Ipping, it makes the newspaper. And there are some people who don't believe it. They're like, oh, there's no such thing as an invisible man. The newspapers are making it up. And then there are some people who are like, oh, holy crap, there is an invisible man. We gotta have a lookout for him, which I think is so funny that they're like, oh, let's have a lookout for him. He's invisible. You can't look at him. You just have to sort of notice whether things go missing or not. He does steal a lot of money within the course of the book. He steals a lot of things. He's become sort of like a thief. He steals clothes at one point. He steals money. He steals a person. He literally kidnaps a person. And then he's like shocked that that person suddenly wants to go against him. Like, no, you kidnapped him. And then at the very, very end, he's like, I want to kill this certain person. He doesn't end up killing that person. He ends up killing Mr. Wickens? The Wicksteed. Yes, Mr. Wicksteed. He murders Mr. Wicksteed. Mr. Wicksteed didn't even see it coming. He was just murdered. And then the Invisible Man is like, I'm going to kill Dr. Kemp. Fails, ends up getting killed himself. This does end with the Invisible Man getting murdered. To be honest, I don't think any of the village people were going after him to kill him. I think they were trying to apprehend him, but because he's invisible, they accidentally killed him. And so that is something very interesting that is we'll talk about in the themes. So that is the Invisible Man, aka Griffin. Now our next character is Mr. Marvel. Mr. Marvel comes in after the people in Ipping find out that Griffin is invisible. They don't necessarily know his name either. They are like, okay, there's an invisible man. He may come back. We've got to be careful. And Mr. Marvel is this homeless guy that's just chilling. And the Invisible Man comes up to him and says, hey, we are the same person. You need to help me. And Mr. Marvel's like, you're invisible. And it takes him a while to get it. Griffin, of course, becomes frustrated because, again, he doesn't like people and he has no manners. So he gets mad at Mr. Marvel for very much not getting he's invisible. Once he does get that he's invisible, Griffin asks him to go grab his books, which inside these books is sort of the formula for how to become invisible. So Mr. Marvel does. He grabs the books. There's quite a commotion called, and Griffin ends up beating up like a whole entire town. And Mr. Marvel is terrified out of his mind. Griffin keeps on stealing things from other people and putting it in his pocket so he doesn't get caught. And Mr. Marvel's like, I've got to get out of this place. I got to get away from this man. He's insane. He's gonna kill me. He's threatened to kill me many times. And he eventually does escape from him, and he asks police officers to like put him in like the deepest, darkest cell so that Griffin can't get to him. And at the very, very end, it is hinted that Mr. Marvel actually kept the books that Griffin wrote in about the formula from the Invisible Man, and he studies them. It's not hinted. It very much says that that's the case. Although a whole lot of people are like, oh, I don't know where those books went. Mr. Marvel knows. He has kept them. And also he takes the money that has been stolen, that Griffin stole for him, and he like makes his own little inn. Or is it like a bar? I'm not 100% sure. It's been about like 3 weeks since I read this book. Okay, so now we're on to our last character. Our last character is Dr. Kemp. Now, Dr. Kemp went to the same university as Griffin did. They knew each other, and Dr. Kemp decided to become a chemist, and while Griffin decided to become a physicist. Dr. Kemp actually has his head screwed on straight. Like, he's the only character in the book who's actually worried about his actions. So what happens is Dr. Kemp doesn't really believe in an invisible man, and then suddenly he realizes that there's somebody in his house, and he realizes it's the invisible man, and the invisible man's like, hey, it's me, Griffin, and Dr. Kemp's like, holy crap, it's Griffin, like, what are we gonna do about it? Griffin tells the story to Dr. Kemp of everything that's happened to him, everything he's learned, everything that he has discovered, and Dr. Kemp is like, okay, well, why are you telling me all of this? And Griffin tells him that he and Dr. Kemp are going to rule the world. Basically, Griffin wants to become a tyrant and wants to rule over a whole bunch of people as the Invisible Man, and if somebody gets out of his way, he's gonna murder them, basically. And Dr. Kemp's like, holy crap, that's not okay. Like, you can't just go around murdering people, and you can't be a tyrant. Like, that's not gonna be okay. And Griffin's like, I don't care. Dr. Kemp writes a letter to a police officer saying, hey, the Invisible Man's inside my house, you need to come help. Griffin is incredibly mad at Dr. Kemp for betraying him and decides that he's going to murder Dr. Kemp. Although Dr. Kemp is actually incredibly smart, and he told the police officer, okay, he can't do this, he can't do this, he can't do this. Dogs bark at him. Like, grab all the bloodhounds that you can. Make sure that he can't have food or water, and he can't get any sleep. And basically, he takes everything that Griffin told him and uses it against him. That being said, Griffin finds out that he's using those things that he said against him and finds a way to do all those things anyways. Dr. Kemp is running away from the Invisible Man, and the whole entire town decides to gang up on the Invisible Man, and he gets killed. The Invisible Man gets killed, not Dr. Kemp. So those are the characters. So let's go over some of the themes that are in this book. One of the themes is isolation. Now, the Invisible Man, sure, he thought that invisibility would be like the greatest thing since sliced cheese, but he is very isolated from the world after he becomes invisible. He can't really talk to people. He can't really do anything with anybody. Whenever he does try to do something, they're always very confused and very shocked, and he gets very frustrated about that. But he's very isolated from everyone. And I think that really plays onto another one of the themes, which is humanity. That when we get separated from the people around us, we tend to drop our moral codes and we tend to go down a very unmoral path. But his isolation does not do well for him. He realizes towards the end that he does need another person in order to complete the plans that he has made for himself. And of course that doesn't work because the plans are completely immoral, and Dr. Kemp has morals. He's a doctor. But he realizes towards the end that he can't be isolated. He can't be all by himself. He has to have help. Now, another one of the themes is power. The Invisible Man, he gets sort of drunk on power. He sort of says to everyone, hey, I'm going to take over your whole entire life, because as a person who is invisible, he's able to do a lot more things that other people can't. He can evade capture, he can murder people, and nobody really knows what he looks like or where he is. And so he sort of gets drunk on that power, and he decides that he's going to misuse it. And in the end, the real power was in the whole town itself, the community who came together in order to defeat the Invisible Man. And so I think it also has a very important theme of power because, you know, at the very, very end, Griffin didn't really have any power. Now the last one, and I already mentioned this, is humanity. Griffin completely lost all of his humanity, partially because he hated people, partially because he realized that his morals didn't really matter when he was invisible. He could do pretty much anything that he wanted to and get away with it. And so he lost a lot of his own humanity, and the other people in the book were able to keep their humanity by being able to by remembering their morals and remembering that they are people and they are able to be seen. And so those are just 3 of the themes that are in this book. And we're gonna move on to my review. Overall, I loved The Invisible Man. I listened to it through an audiobook and decided to buy the book afterwards. This is the original cover of The Invisible Man, which I thought I was getting an original book, but nope. Just the cover. But I really enjoyed it. I really did. Even though it says that it's like a horror science fiction type thing, or a thriller, I think they said it was a thriller. There's tons of humor within the book. They use humor a lot in order to sort of break up the different moments. That one point where he flicks somebody else's nose, that was really hilarious to me. Also the point where he threw a chair at somebody and somebody was like, oh holy crap, that's a demon chair, because they didn't know it was being thrown by somebody else. That was also really hilarious to me. There's just really, really funny points in the book that are just absolutely amazing, and if you are able to read this book, I really hope that you enjoy it. A generation that I think this would really, really read well with is the Gen Z. I know Gen Z's, well, I'm not a Gen Z, or I am a Gen Z. I was born in 1998, figure that out as you will. But I know Gen Zs can be very chaotic. I know that they can, the whole entire generation is just chaotic. So I think that they would personally love The Invisible Man just because of how chaotic it does get. I think it also, it would be able to be a good teaching strategy for Gen Zs because they tend to sort of get drunk on power and with them being chaotic, and it would be a good lesson for them to not have that. If you are a Gen Z, I'm sorry. I'm speaking the truth. I've seen a lot of things where Gen Zs get carried away with power, so just a little thing. I think the format for the book is actually really, really interesting. The whole entire thing is in third-person narration, so you don't actually really get to be inside the mind of Griffin until like maybe the middle of the book, where he starts to narrate his experience up until that point. But the whole entire thing is in third narration. Even that chapter where he is talking about his own experience, Dr. Kemp is narrating it. We never really see from the point of view of Griffin, and I think that's actually a good thing. I also love that it was genuinely like a mystery about who this guy is and how he got there and what he really truly wants, and how it just told all at the end, where Griffin was like, so I accidentally gave a spoiler. I'm gonna cut that out. What was I saying? I freaked out because I said a spoiler. I'm gonna cut that out because I said I wouldn't have any spoilers in my review. I'm sorry. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the telling all. I can't believe I gave a spoiler. It tells all at the end, and it really just powers momentum through the end to where we are like, oh, holy crap, that was really intense. To be honest, I sort of binge listened to the ending while I was at school because I'm a substitute teacher. So right before school started, I binge listened to the rest of the book because I just did not want to put it down. And so I think that just telling all at the end, it really does help to put momentum into the end. Yeah, so that's basically The Invisible Man. Let me know if you like The Invisible Man, either from my description of it or if you've read the book itself. Let me know. I personally loved this book. So amazing. Because I have it in book format, I may just reread it again, maybe next year after my year of classics, just to see like how it differs from like hearing it in a voice perspective to hearing it or reading it in a written word. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please click subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. Also hit a like if you liked this video. And yeah, next time we are going to be talking about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because I read that one as well. And yeah, I'm really excited. So see you guys in the next video. Bye!